In this presentation, we will generate, analyze, and export to Excel comparative financial statements, a comparative balance sheet, and a comparative income statement. In other words, we've had 2 months of operations that we have put into a practice problem. We are now making the balance sheet and income statement for those 2 months and a comparison of those 2 months for the balance sheet and the income statement, as well as a transaction report by date so we can see all the transactions that we have entered for the second month of operations within QuickBooks Online. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We want to take a look now at our financial statements after having entered 2 months of data. This is going to be the year-end financial statements. We have a few objectives for them. One is just to do a comparison. If you're following along with the problem, you can take a look at these financial statements and see if we tie out to them to see how we're doing with that problem. Two, we want to format the financial statement in a way that we would then give the financial statements typically to a client or group them for ourselves or to a supervisor and be used to formatting that, putting it into information that we can then provide in the format of an email or some other way that we're going to provide that information to others. So to do that, we want to go to the reports on the left. We're going to start off with our main report, that being the balance sheet. We'll select the balance sheet. The balance sheet is usually going to be the report we first want to look at and review the account balances. And if we see anything that doesn't look quite right on it, then we will check that here by looking at the transaction report. So in the problem format, you can then go to the transaction report and double check that your numbers are looking correct by looking at each transaction. We'll take a look at that report at the end. Here is our balance sheet. We're going to select the balance sheet for the 2-month time period. So we're going to say 01/01/19 to 02/28/19. So that's January through December. Those are the 2 months that we have as of now. If we run that report, you'll note down here that it just says for February 28th, the second day, of course, because it's as of a point in time. So if we just look at a standard balance sheet, it's just going to be as of a point in time. You can go here and look at the balances as of this point in time. And remember, in practice, if you're not comparing to somebody else who has entered the practice problem, the answer key, then you would check each balance, meaning the checking account, you could check to the bank reconciliation. We'll do a bank reconciliation in a little bit later in a separate section. The accounts receivable, you could check the account balances by who owes you money, who owes us money. The inventory, we can count the inventory and see if that lines up to the inventory that's being reported. Prepaid insurance, we'll talk about how to value the prepaid insurance. So you can verify all these accounts. The undeposited funds, are we holding on to funds that we haven't put in the bank yet, like cash and checks? The furniture and fixture, that typically is going to be on at the original cost. So we can check all those account balances. The accounts payable, who do we owe money to? Do we still owe them money? We can run that report by vendor. The Visa, we could check that, of course, to the Visa statement. Who do we owe for property tax or the taxes, which is the sales or usage tax? Payroll liability, do we owe Social Security, Medicare? Hopefully we have support if we're not payroll professionals with that to help out to make sure that we're processing our liability correct there. Loan payable, we'll have support from the bank, I'm sure, telling us that they owe them money. And then the owner's equity is going to be the difference between those items. If we're a sole proprietor, you can consider this all as one amount, basically assets minus liabilities, the book value, the net worth on a book basis of the business. So that's going to be the balance sheet. You could check these balances if any of them are different and you've been working through this problem. That's okay. We'll go to the transaction report and that's when you'll really find those differences. You may want to check the dates by entering the dates prior and possibly after. So if you're working this problem sometime after February 28th, it's quite possible that you entered some transactions as of the current date because that's what the system would put in the date field as a default oftentimes. So if you increase this date and you see the amount that you're off by goes into balance, then zoom into that account and check out if there's anything that's being entered after this date. If it is, then you can go in there and fix it. You can just change the date for that particular transaction. Now we want to do a comparison between January and February. There's a couple ways we can do it. We can change the total tab and say that we want to change this to months. That's going to be one way that we can make that change and then run that report, of course. So now we've got January and February, a comparison. But also, oftentimes we want to see a comparison and then see, a difference column to see what the difference is. To do that, I'm going to change this back to the total. I'm going to make this just for the month of February, so 02/01/19 to 02/28, February, the month of February 1st through the 28th, and run that report. And then we're going to make a comparison to the prior month. We'll do that by selecting the drop down here, and we want to compare to the previous. So we'll select this item, the previous period, and then say OK and run that report. So now we have February 1st and then the prior month, January. So we have that comparison. Now the only thing different here, of course, is that now we have the current month first and then the prior month second. Now, if we want a comparison and have a subtraction, we can select the previous and have the change in the dollar amount, the change in the percentage, and then run that report. I'm going to go back up and run it again, run that report. And now we see that change. So we see the current period, the prior period, the difference, which is going to be, for example, inventory current minus the prior, there's the change, and then the percentage change, which could give us a nice comparison if we're comparing, say, to another company in a similar industry but has different dollar amounts. We won't go through all the different aspects of the comparative report. We have seen that in the past. What we'll do now is make our normal adjustments and then print this report out and export it. So we're going to go up top to customize the report. We're going to scroll down to the header and footer. We want to remove the date prepared, time prepared, and report bases. And then if we scroll back up, we're going to make it with no cents, no pennies. And we're going to remove the negative number to bracketed numbers and make it red. So there's our information. We'll say run that report. And that'll just clean it up and make it kind of standardized to what we have done in the past. Now let's go ahead and print that report. So we're going to print up top. We're going to have it on portrait and print. Looks like it's fitting on a page, which is nice. So it's all fitting on a page, at least one page wide, which is what we want. So we will print that report. We will put this in the Get Great Guitars or the GGG file that we have set up on the desktop. So we're going to go to the desktop. That's where we want it, GGG guitar. And we're going to say that this is section 8. So I'm going to make a new folder. I'll right click, new, and folder. We'll call this section 8 reports. And again, we might want to put it by date or something like that if it wasn't a problem. If it is a problem for a student type problem or for a class, then a format like this would be good. I'm going to move this over so we can see the title. I'm just going to call it a balance sheet. You might want to call it a comparative balance sheet, but that's okay. Balance sheet. And I'm going to say 02/28/19 is the date. So we'll save that and then close this back out. We'll also export it. I'm going to go to the drop down up top, export to Excel. This is in Google, so there is our report. Looks like everything is fitting here, so I'm going to go ahead and save this by going to the File tab, Save As. We're going to browse. We'll go back to the desktop. We're looking for that GGG folder, section 8, and it's going to be a similar name. It's going to be the balance sheet, and then I'm just going to say it's not a PDF file, however, so I'm just going to delete the PDF, and it should pick up the current file it is, an Excel file, and save. So there is that report. Next report we want to take a look at is the profit and loss. So we'll do the similar report for a profit and loss. To do that, let's right click on this tab up top and say we want to duplicate this tab. Then I'm going to pull the one to the left to the right so that we have the balance sheet on the left. We're going to make the profit and loss on the right. We're going to go to the reports on the bottom now, and we will then make the profit and loss report. Changing the dates up top, first the whole range 01/01/19 to 12/31/19. Well, let's make it 02/28/19, January through February 2019, and run that report. And this will be the information for that time period, January and February. So you can compare your numbers here for the 2-month time period. So we have January and February, and if once again, you usually want to check kind of your balance sheet accounts. They're easier to check and verify with outside verification typically or run checks for, and that'll help to check your income statement accounts. Then we want to check the income statement accounts, and oftentimes we do that with a comparison to see this period to last period and see if there's any unusual activity in terms of a large increase or something like that in an expense. Look into those, basically those comparisons, those unusual type of accounts. So these are going to be the income statement. Once again, if you're off on anything, try to go up top and change the date to a later date, because it's quite possible if you're working this problem at a later date that it entered it as of the current date. And if you see that change, that fixing of the balance by changing the date, then go into it and change the date. You can just change the date back to the proper date. That's not as much of a problem, of course, if you're working real time all the time, because the current date will be the correct date. And it's only in a problem like this where it's not. But there are times when you go back and you have to enter data. You might be entering data for a whole year or entering data from a bank statement for prior months, and you have to be careful of the date, and it's good to be able to go back and find those problems. Now, if we wanted a comparative statement, then we can select the drop down, go to months. So we have the whole range, and now we're going to go to months and run that report. And now we have January and then February. This is great because you have a complete January and February, even though there's a different amount of days in January and February. January 1st, then February, and then the total. So now you can compare the month totals of just February. So if you were off on your totals, then maybe February is where it is off. And you can compare just February and just January and see if January's on and February is off, or vice versa, what the issue is there. Now there's another way we can do this, and it's going to be similar to the prior system. I'm going to change this back to totals, and then we're going to change this to just the month of February, 02/01/19, so February 1st to February 28th, and then run that report. And now we want to pick the previous period. So here's just the month of February. Select the previous period. So we want the previous period. Then we'll run that report. And there we have our comparison. So we have February, and note what it did. It only picked the 28 days of January. So when we run this report, it's trying to compare apples to apples, 28 days to 28 days. So you got to be kind of careful with those type of comparison because of the difference in the days that we have in the reports. Then, so we have this side by side. If we scroll back up top, we can also run a comparison by dollar amount and percentage change, and then run that report. And then again, we have the change in dollar amount and percent. This is really important for the income statement because oftentimes we're going to look at these changes in dollar amounts. And obviously, if it's the first couple months, we might have very significant changes. We don't have a lot of data to really say, is this the norm? Does this look normal? But after time, we can have pretty good expectations about these accounts should be much the same. If there's a significant change in the accounts, then we're going to say if it's a percentage change or a dollar change, that's the account we want to look into and just double check and ask ourselves, well, what happened? Did something funny happen here? Is it justified? Is there something that we did differently? Is there a reason why it's there? And this type of comparison can help us with that. So we're going to do our same practice here. We're going to customize this report up top, and we're going to change the headers down below, and we're going to say date, time, report basis, remove those. Scrolling back up top, remove the pennies, change the negative to bracketed numbers, make them red. And that's our normal thing that we've been doing. So we're going to run that report. And there we have it. Looks like our prior reports looks to be in conformity. Now let's print it. So we're going to print it first to the Qt PDF printer. We will go to the print item. Let's go into the Qt PDF printer so it will print as a PDF file. Here it is. It's going to section 8. So it's already going where we want it to. So I'm just going to call this P and L for let's say 02/28/19. And I'm just going to copy that and save that. So now we've printed that. Going to close this back out. Then we'll export it. Drop down, export to Excel. Here it is in Excel. It looks good here. So we're going to go to the File tab and Save As. We're going to browse within the Save As. We'll go to the desktop up top. We want to go to GGG file, Get Great Guitars, section 8. And then we're going to call this the profit and loss. I just pasted it in there, the profit and loss report, and save. So we'll save that. Next thing we're going to do is close this back out. And now we'll look at a transaction detailed report. To do that, let's right click up top and let's duplicate this tab again. I'm going to move the left tab to the right so that now we're going to have the balance sheet, profit and loss, and then our new report. We're going to go to the reports down on the left, and we will go down to the transaction report. So it's not going to be who you owe. It's not going to be what you owe. It's going to be the reports that are under For My Accountant. And we want to find that transaction detail by date. It looks like it's transaction list by date, I should say. Transaction list by date, that's the one we want. So we'll select that item. And then we're going to scroll back up. We want it for the month of February. So I'm going to change the date up top from 02/01/19 to 02/28/19, February 1st through February 28th, and run that report. Now, if your balance sheet was off or your income statement was off, or if you're in practice and you just want to see the activity, see what has been happening, either input that you have been put in place or that, say, someone you're working with puts into place, or you're working with a customer, or you're working with a client, or you're working with an employee or someone you work with, then you can see the activity, what actually happened, not by account, not like a GL, not in order of an account, but by date. And it's a great report for grading. It's also a great report just to review the data input that's been put into the system for a certain time period, in this case, the month of February. So it's an order by date. It gives us the transaction type. These are the forms that drive the transaction. Once you see these forms, you just want to be able to kind of, after you start looking at them, you want to be able to say, what's the transaction? What's the journal entry? Which accounts are affected? Which accounts are going up or down when I see each of these forms? Because they're very specific. That's why QuickBooks has those forms. That form means this account's going up and down. So if you go through these items, you can check each one of these off, and if everything is right here and January was correct, then our balance sheet and income statement should be correct. We got the number, we got the posting, we've got the name. That's going to be vendors, employees, or customers. We've got any memos that we put into place. We don't have many. You should probably have more. If you're putting this into your system, more is better. And then we have the other accounts. So this is the accounts that are affected. So the checking account and split here means there's multiple accounts that were affected elsewhere. And then we've got the accounts payable and inventory. If you look at these transactions and the split and compare them to the transaction type, the forms, and then get a feel for the accounts that will be affected, the more you do that, the better you have an understanding of what QuickBooks is actually doing, how it's built, what the functions of each thing will do. And then, of course, we have the amount. So if you check the amounts over here and you check each line item on the account and in the split, then if all that ties out, you should be good. So if you scroll through here and check through those off, then you should be good. Now, if anything doesn't tie out, if there's something on this report that's not on your report, then the goal is to change the date range again. Change the date range usually to a later date and see if you entered something in the current day that you entered the transaction, which is later than February, the date that we entered the transaction here. If it is, then just go in there and zoom in to that item and then change the date, and you should be okay. Then and that'll fix that. If there's something on yours that isn't here, then your question is, well, should it have been in January? Maybe it's something that we entered in January that got input into the system in February, or maybe it's something that shouldn't be there at all, in which case you can go in there and just delete the transaction or make it 0. So again, if there's any problem with any of these, you can click on it. That'll take you to the form, of course, or whatever was used to input it. This being an invoice, and you can make the change needed. If it's a date change, you can make the change there. If it's the amount change, you can make the change there. And then we'll close this back out. And again, if this report is good, then your balance sheet and income statement should be good. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to customize this report to our normal type of customization process. It's a little bit more confusing because this is a long report, so it's not going to fit on a couple columns wide. We're going to take the date prepared, time prepared off. We're going to say pennies. We're going to say it's going to be bracketed, make it red, and run the report. Now we're going to print it. So we'll go to the print option up top. We're going to say it's portrait right now. Let's look at the preview. I'm a little worried about it because it's a long report. So if we go to the print on the left, we're going to see that it's pretty small, and QuickBooks is forcing it to fit on one page wide, which is nice, but it had to take it down to 70% of its normal size. So that's not that good. So we're going to cancel that. How about we change it from portrait to landscape? We'll try that, and then print the report and see what it looks like over here. It should look at least a little better. So QuickBooks still had to modify it, but now it's up to 91% of its normal size. That's not too bad. It'd be nice if we went in there and adjusted the columns to make it 100% so the font is the same as our other reports, but we won't go into that detail now. If you wanted to do that, it would probably be best because again, the presentation is worth pretty much as anything else, right? So if you get all the font the same size and everything, then you can do that by just simply changing the columns so that it doesn't have to decrease the size of the font. So then we're just going to say print. It is going where we want it to go, so I'm just going to change the name to a transaction list by date, and we'll say as of 02.28.19 is going to be the date. I'm going to copy that so when we export it'll be the same, and save. So we'll close this back out. Now let's export it as we've done in the past by going to the drop down up top, export to Excel. It's going to open up here in Google Chrome. May look different in different browsers. Here we have the report. This one's not going to fit on one page wide if we were to print it, however. So if we go to this tab, the second tab, we'll note this is the layout tab, and then go back to the first tab, we'll see that it doesn't fit. So what we'll do to try to fix that, we'll typically go to the page layout and we'll say this is way too wide to do portrait. So we got to go to the page setup and change the orientation to landscape. That's the first thing. Then we can tinker with the size of the cells here and or delete columns if we want to. That'd be the best way to do it. Like the split column probably doesn't need to be this wide just because of this one transaction. We could probably say maybe this should be like that. And so we can make some adjustments. We could probably delete some columns. After we do that, the next option is to go to the print to the file tab and go to the print. And then we'll scroll down and say, okay, we've given up on doing any other adjustments. We're going to change the scaling and fit to all columns on one page. So there we have that. And so now it's still 2 pages long. I'm not too worried about that. I just don't want it 2 pages wide. So you got to tape the thing together to see how many columns it's on. So it's pretty small right now. It would be better not to do this once again and get it to full size by adjusting the columns manually. But this would be the last option you can do. So then we're going to say File, Save As. Let's save this. We're going to browse. We're going to put this on the desktop. We're going to go into the GGG file and put it in section 8. And that's where it goes. Transaction list. That's what same name, and save that. Now we'll just organize these reports to give to somebody. If we were to go into the GGG file, this is where we put them on the desktop. We're going to go in here and say, all right, they're in the section 8. So there's section 8. So we'll open that up. Here's our forms. Now again, if we wanted to give this to someone, we could attach all of these forms there on an email or something like that, but that's kind of messy. So we want to make it look nicer somehow. We could go back to the prior file, right-click and zip whatever file we have. Not just to compress the size of it for an email, but to give it something that can actually attach a zipped file so that they don't have like a bunch of like 10 items that are just hanging out in the email and you got to open them all up separately. They can at least kind of download it at one time. So that's nice. Or we can go in here and we can just try to put all of this on one Excel file or one PDF file with the use of Excel. That's what we'll do now. So I'm going to make a new Excel file. Right click, I'm just going to make a new Excel file. We'll put all these reports on one file and then we'll use that file to create one PDF document. So to do that, I'm just going to open the balance sheet first. So let's open up that balance sheet and we just want to take that information from it, put it on our new file. So to do that, I'm going to select the whole thing, which Control A will work if you select Control A, or this triangle if that doesn't work. And that'll select everything. And then you can right click on the selected area and copy. And then go back to our current report right click on A1, make sure you're on A1, right click and paste the first item. And there it is. And now I'm going to paste the name. So I'm going to go back to our balance sheet report. Not that one, that's my new report. The balance sheet, I'm going to copy this name by double clicking on that tab, and you got to use the keystrokes or Control C to copy. And then back to our balance sheet, our new balance sheet, double click on the sheet tab, and you got to select Control V to paste right there, or you can type in balance sheet there. And now we're going to add the profit and loss. So I'm going to add another tab with this little plus, as we've seen in the past. Go back to our reports, profit and loss report. We're going to open that one up. Same process. We're going to copy the whole thing with Control A, or you select this item up top, this little triangle, copy the whole sheet, right click and copy. Then we're going to go back to our new sheet with the balance sheet in our new one and put our cursor in A1 and right click and paste. Then I want to paste the tab name. So we're going to go back, not to the balance sheet, but to the profit and loss. Double click on the profit and loss and Control C, copy. Go back to our new tab where we have the sheet 1. Double click on sheet 1 and Control V for paste. So there we have that. And now we're going to add the one more for the transaction detail. So I'm going to add another tab. Here's the transaction detailed report that we just looked at. Going to copy the whole thing, right click and copy. We're going to put that on A1 in our new tab, right click and paste, and then change the tab name. So we're going to go back to our transaction detail, double click on the name, Control C for copy, back to our sheet, double click on the sheet name, Control V for paste. So now we have the balance sheet profit loss transaction list. This transaction list, however, is not formatted again. So if we go back to the sheet, to the layout, and back to the current tab, it's not formatted. So we're going to go back up top, page layout. We're going to go to the page setup, orientation, landscape. And this time, let's try to make some other adjustments that we may not need this posting column. Let's just delete that. I'm just going to right click and delete. And so this column A, we don't need. We can't delete it because it's got the title in it. So I'm just going to try to make it small. It's like, we'll make it basically non-existent there. And then the memo tab has one memo. So let's try to right click and delete the memo tab. And there we have that. And then the name, we could probably make a little bit smaller. And there we've done it. We fit it on one page. So now when we print it, all these reports together, it'll at least have the same font, although this one will be orientation instead of landscape. So now let's save this. We'll go to File tab, Save As, and we're going to browse. We're going to put this back on the desktop again into the GGG folder, Section 8. We're just going to call this Section 8 Reports and save that. And then we can also save it as a PDF. So we can go to the File tab up top, but we're going to print it to do it. I'm going to print it to that cute PDF printer. It's on, notice I only see one tab right now. I'm going to go to the Sheets, and I want to see the entire workbook. So then if I do that, now I have the balance sheet, I have the profit and loss, and notice the font size as I go now to the next report. It's the same. It looks nice. It's not like they squished this down to a smaller size, so that looks good. And the Excel's a little bit easier to format to be able to do that too. So if you want to put all this stuff together, Excel can be a little bit nicer to format in some ways, so that you can keep the font the same size. You can add grid lines or something like that if that would be helpful. So then we can print this out. It's going to the right place. It's going to be a Section 8 report, so we'll save that. And then if we were to open it up, here's the Section 8 report. If we open it up, it's going to be in a PDF format, which is kind of like the standard format for just like a document that we're not expecting anybody to change or anything. So here's the balance sheet, and here's the profit and loss. We probably should have changed the name to a comparative balance sheet and comparative profit and loss. But and you can do that now in Excel or in QuickBooks, and then repost it. And then this one's lining up, looks pretty good. in this format if someone was to open this up and read it in this format. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.